501cast. Information you need from experts we trust.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Bennett. I'm an account manager at Nonprofit Resources, and today we have Jason Finucan with Stigma Zero to talk about cutting out the stigma in organizations and prioritizing mental health through unprecedented times. So Jason, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you founded Stigma Zero?
Absolutely, Emma. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And just to give some context to people, I did found the company Stigma Zero in 2015, but not before I had gone through a very unusual journey towards understanding what mental illness was and understanding what stigma really was and how much of a problem it was in our society and therefore our workplaces. What was unusual about it is that for me, it actually began with a physical illness. When I was a young boy, I had a heart defect, and that heart defect led to me requiring open heart surgery at 12 years old. And there's something amazing that happens when you go through a massive illness in your life that shuts down everything. I missed 3 months of school. I was quite ill for a long time, but I never once had anyone in my life question my character or my work ethic, or how hard I was trying, or whether I really needed that surgery. All of those stigmatized ways of thinking towards mental illness, they just didn't apply. There was absolutely zero stigma. And of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I was learning a very important lesson. I was learning what it feels like to go through something like that with the total absence of stigma. Now, at 12 years old, I recovered. Thankfully, it was a huge success. It was actually at the Toronto Sick Kids Hospital and in Ontario, Canada, and they did an amazing job. And I came out of it 100% healthy, repaired heart, no heart defect. I just have a big scar on my chest, and that's it. And I lived until I was 26 with the kind of health that we all so easily take for granted, the kind of health where you don't really think about your health. You just expect it to be there. And I'm not going to lie, I really believed that I'd had my major health scare for my whole life. I thought I was going to live until old age without any more difficulties because I sort of checked that box early. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case. And at 26, I began experiencing the symptoms of what would later be diagnosed as bipolar disorder. The first symptoms were a mild depressive phase that lasted 3 months in 2002. Now, the minute that this happened, I instantly hit the brick wall of stigma. And that started because I was part of the problem that I've now dedicated the rest of my life to try to help solve. I had stigma towards people with mental illness. I thought that my own mother, who struggled quite seriously with clinical depression and alcoholism, and my father did not, I actually grew up thinking my mom was weak and my dad was strong. My mom didn't try that hard and my dad did. I loved my mother and I had a good relationship with my mother, but I actually had those stigmatized thoughts towards her and towards others. And so, of course, when I thought I had a mental illness, the first thing I said was, nope, that can't be happening. That can't be me.
Not me, yeah.
No way. I'm more like my dad, right? I work hard, I get things done, and I try. And I just flat out rejected it. Completely rejected it. And that is called self-stigma. When you take all those negative thoughts that are out there in society about mental illness and you apply them to yourself, you do something you would never do with any physical illness, which is that you just try to soldier on. You try to live through it. You cross your fingers and hope it'll go away. And in my case, the illness was not interested in that kind of a path because it just simply got worse and worse. Until in 2005, I actually had a full-on manic episode, which resulted in, it lasted 6 days, during which I didn't sleep at all.
Wow.
And it resulted in a 3-week forced stay against my will in a psychiatric hospital. My family had to essentially do this because I wasn't realizing while I was manic how sick I really was. I was in denial about it, and I needed to be hospitalized against my will. And as hard as that is to go through, and trust me, it's not easy, I absolutely, that was my sort of, not so much my rock bottom, but it was the moment that clarity finally set in. And I was diagnosed properly as having bipolar 1 disorder. I was given a clear treatment plan And my doctor was very good at reminding me at that moment, I was a young man, and if I followed the treatment plan, I could very likely recover from this. And it was in that phase of my life that I basically finally looked at stigma for what it was and realized that it was nothing more than an antiquated, outdated way of thinking that we would not apply to anything that we consider physical illness. And
Mhm.
yet, what I was going through was a physical illness. My brain was not functioning properly.
Right,
And I
right.
needed, in my case, I needed medical treatment to help that. And it was the minute that I got rid of stigma in my own life that I began to own my own illness and began to become part of the solution. And within 6 months, I had found a treatment structure that worked, and my symptoms were completely at bay. And my very rocky road of 3.5 years was over, and I was myself again. That moment is when I sat up and I said, I learned something here between my heart surgery and what I've gone through now that is extremely important when it comes to stigma. And I've always been a comfortable public speaker. And I just felt like if I didn't say anything, if I didn't do anything, I would be being selfish in a way. And
Mhm.
so in 2006, I began volunteering for a local Montreal based, is where I live, Montreal, Quebec, Canada, a local Montreal based organization that does really great work in educational outreach in this topic, in this area. And I began speaking with them and sharing my story through them. And I delivered over 100 keynotes from 2006 until when I finally founded Stigma Zero in 2015. And I decided to pursue this as 100% professionally and my career and my mission. And our goal with Stigma Zero is very, very simple. We recognize that mental illness can only be treated right now. There is no simple cure for any mental illness right now, but stigma is something that absolutely can be cured and eradicated. And if businesses can do that, they will find that just like if you eliminate sexism, if you eliminate classism, if you eliminate racism from a workplace, the workplace will function so much better. And that's what we're
Mhm.
trying to do with this company and with our services.
Oh, that's awesome. And you have a book as well and a training course for the workplace environment for people to learn about stigma and how to reduce it with their own staff. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. The
Mhm.
book is a little bit more directed towards individuals. It's really, the book goes deeply into my entire experience because what I really want the book to do is to help individuals who are in that place I was in back in
Mhm.
2002, 3, and 4, help them to accelerate their acceptance of their situation and learn how they can own their own illness. But I also want it to help people who are caregivers. There's so many people out there who have a loved one who is suffering right now and they don't know how to help them. And my book was written in such a way that it would give them help as well.
Mhm.
So that's a big part of why I did that. But the online training program that we offer through Stigma Zero is very surgically designed and specific towards the workplace needs of understanding what is mental health, what is mental illness, and how can we eliminate stigma in the workplace and start having open conversations about this, at least between employee and employer, so that we can, when someone is sick, more quickly deal with that illness and get them back to work and being productive.
Right, right. That's great. I think we'll discuss both. First topic I want to touch on is kind of that personal mental health, because I think, you can't pour into a cup unless your cup is full, right? So addressing our own issues, especially, June 2020, we're in kind of crazy times. Uh, you know, People are suffering emotionally and mentally in a lot of different ways. And so, how do you differentiate between your mental health and mental illness? When is it something that might need medication and treatment?
It's a really good question. And I give, there's a phrase out there you'll hear a lot, and it's mental health problems. And that
Mhm.
phrase is not inaccurate, but it's often misunderstood. And I like to use this analogy to clarify the difference. If you or I were, if right now we were at our ideal weight, let's say, the amount of weight we have in our bodies is good and is healthy. If in the next 6 months we gained 30 pounds, that is not a physical illness yet. That is a physical health problem. We have let ourselves go, per se, in a way that is potentially going to create long-term problems for us if we don't lose the weight. And maybe it's indicative of a habit with our eating or with our diet or with our drinking. Something has gone a little bit awry for us to suddenly do that. We should pay attention to it, but it may not need medical intervention. A mental health problem is something that every human being is going to go through multiple times in their life. That's a stressful situation. That is a divorce. That is a loss of a job and now you're looking for a new job, or financial pressures, or, as we all know right now, the pressures of a pandemic and a social justice movement. These are all things that are affecting all of us, and we are going to experience some stress. Now, that does not mean that a person is suddenly, who feels more anxious than normal, has an anxiety disorder and therefore a mental illness. It could just mean that they're struggling to live in this particular environment. It's very important to know the difference between when you need to simply take better care of yourself versus when you might need to seek at least the consultation of a medical professional. Now, many people won't need actual medical treatment to treat even a mental illness. If you have an anxiety disorder, you might be able to do many things that allow you to handle that without medication. But if medication is required, my attitude is always, why are we so concerned and or vilifying that medication? It's like asking a person who's diabetic, hey, you seem like you're doing good. You know, do you really need that insulin anymore?
Right.
I mean, people don't think like that because they understand the insulin is helping that person. So I have bipolar 1 disorder. That's a very severe mental illness. And in my case, I do need that insulin. And my insulin it comes in the form of 2 different medical treatments that I take every day. Many people with low grade, let's say moderate level depression, where societal pressures or lifestyle pressures might instigate an episode of depression, they may not need medication. They may just need time and rest. The simple truth is that if it isn't normal for your state of mind and your state of being, speak to a medical professional about it, get information about it, learn about it, what's happening, and learn what you can do to react to it. If you respond in all the good ways, get better sleep, eat better, take care of yourself, get exercise, all of those good things. But if that doesn't actually help, then you may need to consider the possibility of a second level of treatment. And this is the one, I joke that it's the dirty little secret when it comes to mental illness, but people often are looking for a quick, easy answer. And the sad truth is, there is nothing fast about identifying what's going on with your mental health and treating your mental health. It requires an enormous amount of patience. But I do say to people, you do need to realize that if you follow it logically, you will get there so much faster. If you take stigma and emotion out of it, you will get to the resolution so much faster.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you know, kind of with your analogy on weight gain, it's pretty easy to like put on that weight, but it takes a lot more time to take it off normally. So same
Great
thing
point.
with mental illness. It's pretty easy to kind of slip into habits that might cause those problems. And it takes a lot of patience and self-discipline to kind of recognize it, first of all, by reducing the stigma.
Yes.
And then, you know, getting those good habits. So when we're, you know, our current state, you know, where we're having a social justice movement and also COVID-19, unprecedented times, what should we do? What are some of the things when our mental health is suffering that would help us get out of that?
The first thing that is the easiest thing, we all can do this, and it's probably the singular best method I have used to manage and own my own illness, and I think it can apply to anyone for any illness or even just mild level concerns about mental health, and that is to track your moods and your state of mind and your activities in an app. Nowadays, they're done in an app, which is lovely because I used to do them in Excel and it was a pain. I use an app. I'm not a sponsor for this particular app. I just love it and I'm happy to recommend it. It's called eMoods. And I got it on the App Store. I'm an iPhone guy, and I find this app so easy to plug in. It literally takes me about a minute and a half every day, and I have recorded how many hours of sleep did I get. I've recorded how is my overall mood, like am I experiencing depression or anxiety or any of those big things. but I also record little things like, did I stretch today? Did I work out today? Did I, what's my blood pressure like? Because I was having some trouble with my blood pressure last year. So I started tracking that. I don't take it every day. I don't test it every day, but let's say I test it once a week. That data point now gets put in my app. And when you're all done with all of these things, and you can customize it to your needs, if you're someone who meditates and you find that's very helpful to you, well, then you can track how many times did I meditate this month? And you simply look at the graph and you can see all the data points over the course of a month and forever backwards that you've been using it. So there's two things that happen when you track your illness. There's a mindfulness that happens, the simple act that every day you're asking yourself the question, how am I doing on all these parameters? It keeps you more in tune with how you're actually doing. And you don't sort of fall into that just sliding move that we can all make where we think, oh, I'll deal with that later, I'll deal with that later.
Right.
And so the mindfulness is huge, but the secondary thing is so important, is that it gives you very clear indicators when you've drifted away from your baseline. And when I say your baseline, when you do this app, really have a clear idea in your mind, what is your healthy normal? For you, we're all different. For me, I like 7.5 hours, preferably even 8 hours of sleep a night. And I know there's people watching this who are laughing because they get 4 or 5. And then there's others who get 9 or 10. What is it right for you? And make sure that you're roughly in that zone. So for example, if you suddenly see that instead of 7 hours a night, you're getting 4 a night or 5 a night, and it's more than a one-off, that's a very important change in your behavior and in your health that you should pay attention to. So the first thing to do in this situation is figure out where you are. Are you well or are you not well based on all those parameters? Once you know that, most people are going to find, very understandably, that they have higher than normal levels of either stress or anxiety or perhaps depression because of the stress that we're under. If that's true, then the next step is, what is within your control to improve your day-to-day life? If the friction that you're experiencing is in your interpersonal life, perhaps it's with your roommate or your spouse or your partner, perhaps that's something you need to focus on to try to minimize that, so at least your nest, your home, is a place where you can rest and be healthy. And not all of us can say that, and that's a very real concern. When it comes to work, we're all now working in this way, and we're not used to it. Talk to your boss about it, and if you're having difficulty with it, talk it out and find out how you can improve the situation, what is within your control and the control of those around you, to elevate the quality of your life as best you possibly can. And then the last thing is, if you see an extreme difference between your baseline and how you're behaving right now or feeling right now, don't wait. Go and see a doctor. Because if you do have the onset of perhaps a clinical mental illness, perhaps it's anxiety disorder, there are medications that will help you so much to reduce that anxiety level to a point where you can function. And you can't decide this on your own. I can't give you that advice. You need a medical professional to help you through that path. But the longer you wait, if you feel that you're in an extreme state, the worse it will get. Trust me, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, definitely. So you talked about this app. It's called eMoods.
Yeah, eMoods, yeah, really good app. And by the way, there are probably 15 of them.
Yeah.
I tried 3 or 4, and because I didn't know what they were like, I just simultaneously started using 4 of them, I think it was. And then I narrowed it down to this one, just like the look and the design and the functionality of it.
Yeah. So besides that app, what has been the best resource or another great resource that you use personally?
Yeah, there are, I'm going to give you the US-based resources because of your audience, and just say that there are some phenomenal resources in the US. Probably my singular favorite is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. NAMI.org has an absolutely, it's a treasure trove of not only information, data, but resources that you can grab and download and use. In our online program, we frequently reference them and send people to them. They're very, very good. A governmental one, or I should say maybe not governmental, but it's just a not-for-profit one, is Bring Change to Mind is a really good one. That is based in the UK, but has, again, lots of resources, free resources for anyone. And I've been really proud of what we built in our online program, and what kind of resources it gives to our clients as well. Many of which are curated from the public domain. And so the thing to know is that we live in the singular best time for knowledge sharing and awareness of mental health, mental illness, and now stigma than we've ever lived. I have been a voice speaking out against stigma for mental illness since 2006, and I can't tell you how much better the last 4 years have been versus the first 10. It's a
Wow.
huge difference. The world is really becoming aware of this, which is great, which means Google is your friend. But what I always say to people is find organizations when you're looking for this that are national or international, that are well known and resourced, because there's no reason to grab from the bottom of the barrel when there's so much out there that is very, very good.
Definitely, and a lot of free resources as well.
Absolutely.
So much more accessible.
Yeah.
So kind of pivoting a little bit, recognizing it for yourself is very important, but also recognizing it with other people. Within organizations, how do you recognize it with coworkers or your employees? And what are the signs kind of that you mentioned before? It's easy to kind of recognize it personally, but when we're working virtually still, what ways in the workplace can you start to address some of these issues?
Absolutely. Even before we were working virtually, this was still a challenge, because the workplace is a very interesting environment where we are exposed to each other every day. We get very close, we become friendly, sometimes we become very much real friends. But the reality is there's still a very private aspect to it, that it's just not your business to ask somebody who you don't know very well, hey, how's your marriage? I mean, that's something that you
Right.
probably would do. So it's difficult to go up to someone like that and say, I'm concerned about you, even if it's from a heartfelt place and from an empathetic place. But there still are ways, and it is better than saying nothing, to, and the way that I've structured it in our online program is it's really all about, first and foremost, the relationship between managers and their direct reports, because it is the responsibility of every manager to make sure that the work environment is as positive as possible for the best possible productivity of all the people on their team. One of those things is to resolve potential problems that come up in performance, but also in behavior. And most instances of mental health problems or mental illnesses they're going to appear in the forms of behavior that is very different from the person's regular behavior or normal or baseline. For me, the two ways I presented at work when I was sick, and before I was able to acknowledge it, and before I was speaking openly about it, was I would come into work and I would be depressed. Well, a depressed me is very different from the person you're speaking with right now. I had exceedingly, way less energy. I was more mentally lethargic. I was physically lethargic. I struggled to follow sometimes even relatively basic concepts. I was not verbally communicative. Well, based on what you've seen so far in this interview, even you, who you don't know me that well, you'd be able to say, whoa, that guy's different. Something's different here.
Right.
That kind of situation. And I did have experiences where my boss sat me down and said, listen, you don't seem like yourself. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? There is a beautiful turn of phrase there. And I really think it is the least offensive, the least invasive way to ask and give someone the opportunity to ask for help, is to simply say, I have observed that you're different, not worse. You're not acting badly. You're not yourself. And I'm concerned about that. Is there anything that I can do as your boss, as your coworker, as your friend to help? That phrase works whether it's your boyfriend or whether it's your coworker or whether it's your direct report, because you're not judging them. That's the key. And then the second key, of course, is regardless of how good your words are and how well you choose them, you can't have the stigma or the judgment in your heart, in your voice, because it'll read through. It'll be obvious. And if you were concerned that someone on your team had a problem with alcohol or was had a problem with anger issues. Let's say a person really never was angry that much before, but suddenly they're losing their temper at work. We all know that we would act on that. We would say something about that because it's just a line you can't cross. What I'm suggesting is being ill at work is a dangerous thing for everyone involved. Dangerous because the person can wallow in their lack of wellness for a long time. That can cost companies a lot of money in presenteeism. People show up to work, but they don't work full productivity. But it also allows a person who's in a declining state of health to just simply keep declining. And we should not let that happen. It's always better to ask the question and then remind employees, here are the resources available to you. Virtually everybody who's watching this works for a company that has an EAP program, that has enormous amounts of resources available to every employee. Many of them are free. If I was a manager in one of those companies, I would just say to the person, listen, you don't need to tell me what's wrong. I just want you to know that if you need any of this, it's private, it's confidential, it's available to you. I hope you'll take care of it. And then you keep tracking them. You keep making sure that if they keep getting worse, you have to have that second conversation. Because the truth is, performance will eventually be impacted by someone's mental health if it erodes too much. And that can often be the way that you get in to address it, is if a person doesn't want to share the personal aspect, you can simply say, look, you may not want to tell me what's going on and why you're not feeling well, but the reality is you're not working well. And you used to be one of my top performers, and now you're not. And I know that that's not, either you have decided you want to leave and you're kind of checked out, or something's wrong. So as your manager, talk to me. This is a conversation that can happen that will be preventative and will be positive. The person won't be threatened by this if it's done properly.
Right. And I think that performance kind of definitely plays into virtual, because we're not having those face-to-face interactions. Our company works completely virtually, but yeah, if you're able to see that, this person usually works at this level of productivity, and you see a sharp decline, it might be an indication of something else. So having that conversation of, hey, are you okay? More so than, the conversation of like, why is your work? Kind of looking, behind the curtain, what's going on there.
Yeah.
So you kind of talked about preventative and having the conversation to when you notice that it's happening or you're starting to see a decline with an individual team member, but what resources and conversations should be had with the entire staff and fellow employees to make sure that you can have those open and honest dialogues?
This is where this is the most challenging aspect about this particular problem, is that it is so deeply felt. It is very personal. Everyone has their own opinion and their own experience level with mental illness. And getting everybody onto the same page can be a real challenge. And that is, frankly, the exact reason why I built my company to do what it does and why we built the online program that we offer. I believe that unless you can physically get every employee in the same room over a series of workshops, it's virtually impossible to do it live, even before COVID. And that's why the idea of an online program where you start off with a training that is like a webinar that launches the program and gets everyone to understand why this program is worth taking. And then here's the key. Everyone takes the program and they all know that everyone else took the program. The only way to change culture is trust. We all need to trust that the people we're afraid of, perhaps it's that manager who's made a comment in the past about mental illness not being real. How am I going to reveal to that manager that I'm going through something like bipolar disorder if I believe that that person has a stigma towards mental illness? That's a huge problem. And how am I going to tell you, my colleague, if I think you might have it. You might have that same stigma. So it's not good enough to train a few key people across the company. I believe you really need to give everyone the base level of training, and that training comes in four basic groups. You need mental health literacy. So much of what we're talking about in this conversation is just becoming more literate about what these things are and what they're not, and what can hurt and what can help. Becoming aware. But awareness alone is not enough. You then need to get into, let's talk about why stigma even exists and how our society actually has fed us with a litany of stigmatized words that we have towards mental illness that we do not have towards physical illness, and how choosing to not have a stigma is actually an action. Because otherwise stigma is a trap that we will fall into. Our society has just set us up that way. So that's where you need to learn about stigma and understand it. And then the next step comes down to developing emotional intelligence and empathy. These are two things without which no group of people can ever overcome this particular problem. Because the only way you lose stigma about mental illness is if everyone in the room, whether that's 10 people or 10,000 people, everyone understands at the same level that an illness is an illness and not a character flaw. And the only way you can get to that place is if everyone gets the simple truth, which is that they can imagine what it would feel like to be in my shoes, even though they've never experienced mental illness in their life. The only way to do that is empathy and emotional intelligence. You need those things. So the program that we offer actually develops those skills as part of the core of the program. And then the final part is just practicing in scenario-based training. How do you talk to a colleague? How do you respond? What if you and I were at, it's a little less common right now with COVID, but for companies that physically have offices, you're at the water cooler or at the coffee maker, and you and I overhear another employee speak in a negative, derogatory way about a person who's off on a leave, and they've disclosed that it's because of depression. And they're saying something to the effect of, oh, it's not really depression. I mean, what's depression anyway? She's just lazy. So you and I have a choice, don't we? We have to decide, do we let that person do that? Or do we actually say something? And maybe we're scared to say something because it's a confrontation at work. And maybe that person has a higher rank in our company. But the truth is, all of us need to get to that place where we just don't accept that anymore. Doesn't mean you create fights or confrontations, but you do have to educate that person and say, no, I actually think the situation here is different, and it has nothing to do with laziness. And just having a conversation. Sometimes they're difficult, but that's the only way we're going to get past this. And as you have on the screen here, have an open and honest dialogue. So the program shows why those kinds of things can hurt way more than people realize, and why they're so destructive to company culture. And then the final step is really just managers and HR and senior leaders in companies. They need to know their role. And it's a challenging role. Too many managers are placed in their role because they were great at their job, and now they're responsible for a whole team of people, and they're learning this new skill. How are they supposed to know how to have such a delicate conversation with a direct report? This is not an innate skill. They need to be trained how to do this. And you need support from HR and senior leaders who need to lead the way culturally in the company. And some of the best examples we've seen involve companies where the CEO or someone from the C-suite is willing to speak out about their own personal experiences and say, this is not going to happen in this company anymore. We're not letting stigma happen. And take the training and do what you have to do. If a company wants to change its culture, we know it can. So it's really just a matter of placing that level of priority on it.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to end it asking a question. What is your favorite part about your job, being an advocate against stigma?
I love this question, and I always think about it freshly. I want to make sure that I'm really considering it, but it does come back to this over and over again. When someone who I'm either speaking with, or someone who I've met because I've trained at a company, or someone who's taken our online program, when I see or hear that the training that we've offered or me sharing my story has helped that individual to understand mental illness in a way they never understood it before, and that it has opened their, not just opened their mind, but opened doors for them. They now see
Mhm.
paths towards either recovery or towards better management of their illness or towards helping their loved ones. Or I've had a manager tell me that one of the biggest failures of his last several years was he didn't know how to help one of his employees who was very ill and ended up going off on a sick leave due to severe depression. And after taking the training, when that person came back, he felt like he knew what to do and he knew what to
Mhm.
say. That for me is awesome. It is the most rewarding thing. And people who've read my book and they say that it's helped them to understand their daughter's experience with anxiety in a way they've never understood before. um, Look, what I've gone through has been hard, and I
Right.
just want to take these rough, rocky lessons I learned the hard way, and if I can take the knowledge and pass it on and make it easier for a person or a company to thrive, I just, to me, that is the best way to beat this particular challenge. And that's why my book is called Jason 1 Stigma Zero, not Jason 1 Bipolar Zero, because I don't
Right.
beat, I don't beat the illness. You don't beat that. You manage it. You live with it. You find a way to live and thrive with it. But you absolutely can eradicate stigma and beat it right down to nothing. And one of our jokes is that at our company is that we genuinely hope that in our lifetime, our company is no longer needed in the marketplace. That would be
Right.
pretty great.
Yeah. Well, you guys have a great mission, and thank you so much for taking time to talk. Stigmazero.com is a place where people can find more resources and the training course.
Yes,
And then your
and
email as well, hello@stigmazero.com.
yes, and to reach me directly, you're more than welcome just to put in Jason at stigmazero.com. But
Awesome.
I'd be happy to help anybody who's interested in learning more.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate it. I'll put the links with the video description so people can find that information easily.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.